Hello everyone, I'm Sarah and welcome back to my crochet channel. Today's video is a special request. I designed a flag style dog and pet bandana a few years ago and I was asked to update the pattern with a brand new video, and I'm happy to do that. This bandana can be for any size dog or pet. You just continue to repeat your red and white rows as they get wider, and then you add your blue row on the top once it's as wide and as long as you need. But I'll show you more about that. We get a little farther on in the video. This one is stitched with a bulky 5 yarn, so it stitches up very quickly. And this bandana doesn't have any buttons, ribbons, bows, or anything to worry about that a dog might get their teeth caught in, or even a cat. It's perfect for any animal, and the way we do the ties is we tie them short, and of course you make them as long as needed. That way the tie doesn't become caught into their toenails or anything like that as well. And again, I'll show you that at the end of the video. Now you can find this crochet pattern on my blog, and I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. The yarn I used to design this bandana is called Loops and Threads Charisma, and I have it in white, red, blue, and yellow. This looks kind of goldy, but it's actually called yellow. Now this is a bulky number 5 yarn. And if you don't want to use a bulky number 5 yarn, you can hold 2 strands of a lightweight 3 together and still do this project. The amount of yarn depends on the size bandana. You'll need anywhere from an ounce or more for each color, depending on how big you're making your bandana. We're going to be stitching today with our K hook. It's a 6.50 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need a needle to weave in ends, and also we're going to embroider a little star there with our white yarn, and we'll need our needle for that. And then of course you're going to need your scissors. We'll be starting down here at the point of our bandana. We'll be changing colors every other row with the red and white, and as we do that we'll be increasing to make the length and the width of the bandana. I've got my red here. I'm going to begin with red, but we're going to be striping every other row red and white, red and white. So I've got my white right here as well. We're going to begin with our slip knot, and we're going to chain 4 chains. Now we're going to stitch 3 double crochets in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2 loops, yarn over and go through the second 2 loops. And we'll do that 2 more times. Right in that 4th chain from the hook. So for row 1, we have 4 double crochets because our chain 3 counted as our first. Now you'll notice I did not chain 3. That's because we're going to bring in our white yarn and then chain 3. When changing colors, always do that chain 3 after, because the chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. Now we're going to turn our work. We're going to carry our red yarn across, and what that means is as we stitch, we're going to stitch over our red yarn, and that's going to place our red yarn where we need it to be for the next row. Alright, so we have a chain 3 that counts as our first double crochet. We're going to double crochet in the first stitch, and you can see I'm stitching over that tail of yarn. Then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2, again stitching over our tail of yarn. And then we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in that last stitch. We stitched over that tail of yarn, and we're going to be stitching back to our red, and so it's where we need it to be for row 3. But for row 2, we now have 6 double crochets because we increased by 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end. All right, let's do row 3. We're going to bring up our red, chain 3, and turn. We're going to stitch over the white tail of yarn this time. All right, so we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in that first stitch. There we go. And now we'll stitch 1 double crochet in the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And remember, I'm stitching over my tail of white yarn. And then in the last stitch, we'll stitch 2 double crochets. So now for row 3, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, just to be clear, the purpose of stitching over the tail of yarn when we change colors like that is 2 reasons. If we cut it every row, we would have to weave in every end. And then also, by stitching it this way, it places it where it needs to be for the next row. So for row 4, we're going to bring up our white, chain 3, turn our work, and we'll make sure that our red tail of yarn is across because we're going to stitch over it again. We're increasing by 1 stitch at the beginning, so we're stitching in that first stitch. Then we'll stitch in each of the stitches across until we reach that last double crochet. And again, you can see I'm stitching over my red tail of yarn. And be careful when you stitch over your tails of yarn that you aren't pulling it tightly. You don't want to pucker it up by accident. All right, so I stitched across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then in the last stitch I'm going to stitch 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. There we go. So we began with 4, row 2 had 6, row 3 had 8, and row 4 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 double crochets. So you can see we're increasing by 2 double crochets, 1 at the beginning and end of each row. All right, let's do row 5. We'll bring our red yarn up, chain 3, turn our work, make sure our white yarn is lined up so we can stitch over it. We'll stitch right in that first stitch to increase by 1, and then 1 stitch in each of the double crochets across. Whoops, almost skipped one. That would not be good. Alrighty. And you can see this stitches up very quickly. All right, so I've stitched across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. Then I'm going to stitch 2 double crochets in this last stitch. 1 and 2. So we have 12 double, oops, get in there. 12 double crochets for this row. So now we're going to bring our white back in, chain 3, turn our work, make sure our red is in position to stitch over. We'll stitch in that first stitch to increase by 1 and stitch across. 1 double crochet in each of these stitches working across. All right, now this brings us to our last stitch, and we're going to stitch 2 double crochets to increase by 1 on this row. 1 and 2. All right, now this is all the farther I am going to go on my red and white rows. Now, if you want to make this for a bigger dog or even a bigger cat or a goat or whatever you're making this for, continue to repeat your red and white rows, increasing at the beginning and end of each row. Each one of these is approximately 1 inch. Each row is approximately 1 inch, and that will help you on how big you want to make this. This is the perfect size for my dogs, and so that's the size that I'm going to make. Now also remember, if you're making this for a smaller dog, you can do less rows as well. So since I've got as many rows as I need with my red and white striping, I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2 off. And we're going to bring in the blue because we're going to do 2 rows of blue to represent the field of blue on our flag. All right, so we're going to do it exactly the same. We're going to bring in our blue. We're going to chain 3 and turn. Now we don't have to worry about carrying over any yarns, so we're not going to have to do that, but we will go in the first stitch to increase by 1 on this side, and then 1 double crochet in each stitch across with our blue yarn. I completed that row across, stitched 1 double crochet in each double crochet, then I stitched 2 double crochets in my last stitch. Now we're going to chain 1 and turn. And for this last row of our flag portion, we're just going to stitch 1 single crochet in each single crochet across. Go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through both loops. 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets across the top of our bandana. If you're making a bigger bandana and you want a wider blue section, you can always add another row of double crochet before you add your single crochet row. There we go. 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets across, and we're going to cut our row. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to weave in our ends. So we have white and red and blue ends that need to be weaved in. I've already weaved in my other ends. I'm going to weave in this white one, but don't weave in this blue one yet because we're going to be joining the gold or yellow yarn to it. All right, so we're just going to weave this in, making sure it's going to stay put because you know puppies and kitties like to play, so you want to make sure it's not going to come undone. And it is a little bit more challenging on some of the thicker yarns. Alrighty, so all the red and white is weaved in, and so now what we're going to do is grab our gold yarn, and now we're going to make the ties and the trim. So we're going to begin by adding our gold. Chain 1 and turn. And we're going to repeat what we just did with the blue, is we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets across the top of our bandana with our yellow or gold yarn. I like the color of this one because it's a nice bright crisp gold. 1 single crochet in each stitch across. I have stitched 1 single crochet in each stitch across, and now we're going to form the ties. So we're going to chain 25 chains. Now, this does not make a real long tie. We don't want it to be real long to get caught in their teeth or their toenails. But if you're making this for a bigger dog and you want the tie to be longer, you certainly can make it longer. Once you have chained the length that you need, I chained 25, we're going to slip stitch in the second chain, and then we're going to slip stitch in each of the chains, working back down to the bandana. Go in, pull up a loop, then pull that loop through the loop on your hook. This makes a nice sturdy tie without being too thick. But of course, if you're making this for a bigger dog, you could always do single crochets instead of slip stitches. So I'm going to slip stitch in each of my chains till I reach back to my bandana. I have slip stitched down my chain, and when I reach back to my bandana, we're going to single crochet in that same stitch that we just, our last stitch. Now, the way we're going to do the trim is you're going to chain 3, and then you're going to single crochet in the next end of the row. 1, 2, 3, then I'll go to the end of the next row and single crochet. 1, 2, 3, go to the end of the next row and single crochet. It just makes a nice edge, gives it a little bit of fun, but not anything too fancy, again, that will get caught in their toenails or teeth. And you'll do this the same way even if you've enlarged your pattern for a bigger dog, or even made it smaller for a smaller dog. All right, 1, 2, 3. Make sure you put a single crochet right in that bottom tip of the point of the bandana, and then 1, 2, 3. This is how that looks. And then we'll work our way back up this side of our bandana, chain 3, single crochet in the side of each row. And then once you've reached back up here, you're going to single crochet in that first single crochet, and then we're going to repeat what we did on this side for a tie on this side. I'm going to chain 25 chains. You chain the same amount you did on the other side of your bandana. And then again, once you've chained the length that you need, we're going to slip stitch in each of those chains just like we did on the other side, working back down the chain till we reach the bandana. Once you've slip stitched back down your chain, you're going to go in that first single crochet and stitch a slip stitch and tie off your yarn. All right, and then we'll pull that to the back so we can tie off to the back. Now I went ahead and weaved in my blue ties as well, or my yarn tails I mean, as well. And so now I just need to weave in these gold ones, and then I'll show you how to add that cute little star. Just adds a little extra touch to our bandana. So I've put about 12 to 14 inches of yarn on my needle. And what we're going to do is we're going to come up under where your yellow and blue meet. We're going to count over 3 and come down over here where the white and blue meet, not yellow. Okay, leave yourself a little bit of yarn here for weaving in later. Then we'll come up here, and there should be 3 stitches there, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3 across here. So now we've made a big X, right? All right, I like to pull that down there and go over that for some reason. I don't know why. It just works out good that way. All right, we want to make sure we go in that stitch. And then we'll come up here and go in the middle stitch up here. There we go. And that's how you make the star. It works good because that middle stitch holds the X in place. And then we'll turn it over. I like to kind of weave in, making sure I don't go through and show any of the white. I'm only weaving through the back of the stitches. All right, and then I'm going to do something that they always tell you not to do, and that is tie a knot. But this isn't in crochet right here, right? This little spot, this is just a little bit of embroidery. I don't know why, I just like to tie a knot there. I want to make sure that star is going to hold. You can weave it in if you prefer. I forgot to show you how to tie the ties, and we don't want to forget that. So what I do is I put it around my dog's neck, and I tie the tie like this. All right, I leave it a little bit loose. I slide it on. I give them a little bit of finger room, and then I tighten this down. The next time I put this on, I don't have to untie it. I can just slide it right on over Maxie or Rosie's head. And that is just how easy it is to make the American flag dog and pet bandana.